Hello, morning, can you hear me? I'm Tanya Dave from ABP Mayor. I'm a big advocate of EastME. I'm really pleased to see it in its third year. So my question is around what can we do as a community to support the individual COPs? So it's aimed at Ian, but you're all open to feedback. So Ian, you mentioned that there's huge value from the citizen science evidence to support your feedback today, but you need increased engagement with others to report back every year. So as a group of engaged people here today, what's your ask and what can we do to help in the future to give you the data that you might need to report? So that might be data, but it's also what can we do to increase awareness, engagement with the COPs and EastME.
Thanks for the question. Yes, it is a particular difficulty with marine benthos because typically it wouldn't be surveyed as regular as it would be perhaps other subject matters. So really any feedback, even anecdotal feedback, is a useful process. And obviously as a commercial company, one of several, a lot of work is being done in and around all over the country, but certainly in the southern North Sea. And I think the problem we have is that there's always this client anonymity, and the fact is that data is being paid for by someone. They don't necessarily want all the details produced, and therefore it goes through a very lengthy system before it becomes public domain. But that isn't to say it's highly valuable data that could have a much bigger profile within a group like this. Because I've noticed just when we work with our COPs, to a certain extent we're working in isolation and looking at all the four that's been shown this morning, there's lots of parallels I can see. There's actually points that relate to events that I've seen, both from an oceanography point of view, but also from operations with deep plankton. And we see these events in the real world, essentially offshore. Now the problem is reporting that, and the current system does not lend itself to be able to get this information back into the public domain, or certainly into the research domain. And I think my ask really is that of the regulators, if they can, because most of our clients will react to what a regulator requests, whether it's MMO or whether it's Natural England, JNCC, whoever, is that what we would like to see, I don't mind as a commercial company providing the data public anytime, but it's the clients need to be able to accept that. So what we would like the regulators to do is to ask for an output from those data sets. It may be in a slightly sterilised way, but certainly what are the events that what are the key events that this data shows, and make that more disseminate that into the public. Now, I think probably the easiest way to do that is to perhaps produce some kind of form, very simple form that gives every project that's done, whether it's small, large, etc., where you ask the type of data or types of interpretation from that data that then becomes public access. Because I think if that was offered to an operator, whoever that might be, and that was part of the license agreement, is to produce an output within a certain period of time with the surveys done, then I think that would be very useful. Otherwise, I'm scratching around to try and find information. I can pull out some of the information myself. 15 minutes isn't enough time to talk about it, as you can find out. But really, other commercial operators don't want to talk to me because they don't want. It's not their data; it's their clients' data. But to be honest, they don't mind. But I think if there was perhaps a change in attitude, then we could possibly get more data disseminated into the public.
That's it. Is there a regulator in the room that wants to come back on that? Because I guess there's a few people that may, or we'll just send you an email later.
I can just say a few things, but Mike, I'm looking at Mike Best. Where are you, Mike? Hiding. Yeah, so obviously Environment Agency, we do hold quite a lot of data, water quality data, plankton data, all sorts, but one thing we are aware of is, the accessibility to the data. So we have got it out there, but it's really difficult to use. And I think we are very aware of that. And I think there are hopes that we can make it more accessible. So there is at least the acknowledgement that unless you really know how to use it, it's very difficult to kind of pull out the data.
But I mean, you can put it onto a database, so there is a requirement and for a lot of commercial projects. But that also introduces quite a big time lag. What I'm talking about is even at a very, very simple level, is to say when you do when a fieldwork is done, just provide something very quick summary of what's been observed, because there's a lot of anecdotal data based that can be derived from real data. That's the other way around actually. That is very useful to a number of users, but it's not accessible, and it often isn't accessible until years after the project's done, if at all.
Well, you can be with this knowledge that we're finally getting our area teams to actually go out with electronic pads and sort of start to get real-time data loaded. Before it was a lot of notepads, so we are getting there. It's a bit slow, and every area that we have 14 different areas across the country, does something slightly differently. So it's about that consistency, and we do need to get there. But yeah, appreciate that. And I know that the Crown Estate has a lot of data as well, don't they, on the data exchange. So there are, and we need to join up with things like that as well.
Yeah, but what they're doing is concentrated on these big programs. Most of that's 2023. Yeah. So it's on the one bed, the Poseidon project. That's all accessible. That's great. What I'm talking about is all commercial work. So you've got wind farms, you've got interconnectors, you've got cable routes, you've got decommissioning projects. All of those are marine survey works, and the regulator oversees all of those, whether mostly JNCC, so offshore, Natural England inshore. And I think if we could introduce a fairly simple reporting process after every survey, so when the survey's done, it reports back, this is a summary, rather than getting into the weeds with the actual data, because that will happen eventually, but that will take time. But what we're talking about is trying to identify events within the year it's happening, and that's just not possible in our time frame on that subject matter.
Thank you both. I was just wondering, Rodney, you kind of hinted at some of the opportunities for more work and collaboration on data.
Well, I think there's a gap between the sort of the DEFRA level view of what's happening in the North Sea, and that goes into the national reporting, and then the knowledge that's in this room of what we know is happening on our patch in that area. That does involve data, and I think one thing that people could do is become data publishers themselves. I mean, it's not something that universities do very well as guardians of data, but there are portals out there like Zenodo and Figshare that you can get a DOI for your data. So we do that with our, it's quite expensive. We go out in Humber with our students for a week, costs a lot of money. I think it's quite a lot of data, and we try to replicate the sort of the Mike Best Environment Agency data. So we put that on Figshare, I think, and that's had hundreds of downloads. I don't know what people do with it, but people are actually downloading it. I think anybody can do that, and then pass the word around between the EastME community and maybe get the ball rolling in that means. The thing that you have to be aware of, though, is quality control. So we've got a project at the minute where we're trying to give some of the pot fishermen out of Bridlington temperature and salinity loggers to put in their lobster pots. So they're going to stay down for a couple of weeks. We don't have very much seabed data. We've got the satellite data that Ben showed for the sea surface, but the depths of the sea is quite difficult to measure. So really, any kind of seabed temperature data would be really, really useful if we've got a latitude and a longitude. So we're trialling that next week. We'll see how it goes. First time, we try to keep the instruments as cheap but well calibrated as possible. Hopefully we'll get some results out of that.
That's right. Any other questions? Milo. This is the Milo that's had 2 mentions already today. So.
Hi, I'm Milo from the RSPB. Great presentations, everybody. Thank you. I suppose for Ben or maybe Rodney, quite specifically, I'm curious about what contributes to that decreased turbidity at the Humber and the Thames, but not necessarily other estuaries on the East Coast. Is it just a typical character of that form of estuary, or is there something else going on?
So Humber itself is the rainfall influx and hydrology would usually be the driver of turbidity, and then you've got how Sperm Point is situated over the Humber, acts as a sort of tidal barrier. Say the wash itself is direct forcing of tide, so that would drive the turbidity out into the sea with tidal flux. This is more protected in the Humber. but I'd say it's mainly due to lack of rainfall throughout that 6-7 month period during the year.
Great, thank you.
Probably lack of a really big storm event that we've had in previous years that really sets off the coastal erosion, particularly down the Holderness coast, and mobilises huge amounts of material that washes around for weeks and weeks after. So we didn't see that in 2025, these really big, like Storm Arwen in 2021, I think. Harry, is it the one that killed all the kelp? Storm Arwen, wasn't it? Yeah. We haven't had that for a couple of years.
Interesting question, isn't it? So you've got the terrestrial and then you've got the bits of terrestrial falling into the sea. It's quite a dramatic thing. It seems a long time ago since we had snow, but I remember that had an impact on the wash, that, you know, when the Wolds and other places had a really big snow, and then the discharge, I mean, the temperature changes and things, quite a big link. I thought the plan that was put up that showed the catchment for EastME was really dramatic, isn't it? You know, Birmingham, right across, so actually remembering our connection inland. So, yeah. Any further questions? Anything to raise from panels? There.
Hi, thank you. Philippa G from Arab. I've got a question for Michael and Laura. Michael, it was amazing to see your passion for the East Atlantic Flyway. And I was really interested in what the key local challenges to achieving that World Heritage status are, and whether the kind of nature recovery work that is being carried out by Natural England and partners can support that, and how we could also support it.
Oh, that's brilliant, really, really good to hear. I think that's a great question, because I think World Heritage status and achieving that, it usually takes between 5 to 10 years to achieve. We've got sort of experience of travelling around the world and seeing that, but also now in the UK as well, actually, with the Flow Country was inscripted, and which is a really great kind of bit of progress in this last year. What we could see is that's a really good model, actually, in Scotland, whereby Nature Scot took a really active role in helping to support the inscription. That's a really critical component. So I think that the role of the statutory bodies and how they can come together is really key. But it's really important to recognise that the local voice and the communities and the benefits that come from people wanting to see a World Heritage status and wanting to have that pride in place and receive those benefits of having it too is really key. So I couldn't underestimate or underline enough the importance of probably local communities and local authorities. And so it's really important to see how you can work with local authorities and how they can come together. Now, I recognise that I think that there's always a moving political kind of dynamism that comes with that. But decision makers, I think that are really important to us will be those local authorities and combined authorities. The mayors, for example, those are really important kind of contact points too. So it's really got to be that combination of that kind of like national approach, recognising what it can do for the country, but at the same time bringing together those local voices. The team will have to continue now to keep building that kind of like engagement, so more and more engagement, going out to hear about what's important to people where they are, whether that's fishing communities, whether that's recreational access, you know, whether that's about business, whether that's understanding the dynamics of, let's say, for example, grid connections that comes from offshore, but how does that all mix? How does it all come together to still underline, if you like, what the merits of saying that there's universal important value to this place? So yeah, we'd love to see a little bit more probably from the likes of the statutory bodies to come together with us and really open to seeing how we can kind of facilitate and support that. But it would be remiss of me not to mention again the fact that there is a lot of people on that kind of list of partners that are in there, and whether it's the Wildlife Trust or the National Landscapes, lots that can be considered within that. People often say, why just the boundary as it is? I mean, we've defined the boundary on the basis of the SAC and the SPA network. It's an existing sort of protected area. It's not about putting more legal protection on it, but it's about raising the profile. And really an important last point I'd say is that let's see, for example, where we might be in 30, 40, 50 years' time, maybe even 100 years' time. We'll expect there to be change, because we've seen change over the last 20, 30 years. What we're looking for is the ability to have that level of of appreciation for how important this area is, and to try and retain some functional interest. And that sounds quite technical, but it's basically saying this place is special, it will change, but how can we work with that adaptation and continue to see that it provides that really important global representation from an environmental perspective and from a cultural perspective.
Right, just mindful of the time and the pace today. The first thing I want to ask you to do is show appreciation for all of our speakers this morning.